This is the En-ROADS model. It utilizes the best available science to simulate how policy measures affect our climate system. On the left here, we have a stacked graph of global sources of primary energy, things like coal, oil, and renewables increasing by the end of the century. Each of those levers holds many different solutions and many different policies that can be used to tackle this climate issue and think globally but act locally. Today, we're going to have the opportunity to work with these solutions. Given our current scenario, what do you think could help us achieve limiting temperature increase to 2 degrees Celsius? Anyone can propose anything.
Maybe the reduction of coal and oil.
Yeah, that's great. I'd like to hear more about what you're envisioning.
That carbon price sounds quite promising.
Watch what changes. With the carbon price, coal is actually impacted the most. The producers of coal are then saying, oh gosh, this is expensive. I don't want to make coal. Maybe let's switch to renewables. So are there any downsides you guys can think of?
I listened to a podcast the other day and it was by the BBC and it's called The Climate Question, and it talked about how these countries that are still undergoing development, that will be quite tricky for them if it's then all of a sudden so expensive. I think that's the trouble with all of this. It's like, how do you balance both?
So to help us understand this, I've actually brought up the graph of cost of energy. So there are types of policy that can work to help this, making sure that the producers of this energy aren't passing on those extra costs onto their consumers. When we create a project, we want to make sure that we're not only tackling what we think is going to be a solution, but also thinking about what are the implications of that.
I'd like to test out the population growth. There's a lot of ethical question there as well, to say limiting, for example, the number of children you're allowed to have.
It's interesting for me to see that our carbon price actually had a larger impact in decreasing our population basically as much as would be feasible.
So I was reading an article the other day and it said around 40% of the products of deforestation goes towards paper.
How ambitiously do you want to reduce deforestation?
If it was up to me, I'd get rid of all the paper. Go all the way.
Stopping deforestation is only this small part.
Vegan and vegetarian options are becoming way more cheaper as it continues to grow. Can we try the methane?
Definitely made a much bigger change. I think the technological side of the removal
is the biggest decrease we've had yet, I think.
If you can see, our graph has shifted. It's encompassing negative emissions. With this change that we made, we've seen that this blue line of CO2 removals is coming up towards our CO2 emissions. And we can think about this like a bathtub. What we need to do to decrease our temperature is we need to both stop that tap. We need to stop new emissions. Then we also have to open up the drain. We have to let those emissions come out to actually decrease our temperature and create a better world. I think another important thing to recognize is that not one of these levers is going to be what they call a silver bullet. What kinds of solutions stood out to you guys? Was there anything that really surprised you?
I quite like the afforestation kind of side of things.
I think for me it was the population growth, seeing that and how it really didn't change anything. I think just goes to show how we need to focus our energy on many other things. And
I think you highlighted that, Luna, didn't you? It's like, I just wanted it to drop to like 1 point whatever. But the thought was, we're not making a big impact. I feel disappointment. But what Luna did brilliantly, you switched it into, but actually that's a really good thing, because then people can have more choice in what they want to affect.
So if you want to approach climate change systemically, that can be things like creating policy or advocating. Use your voice as a consumer to tell companies that we don't want this anymore, we're not going to buy it. Truthfully, in this world, money is a huge incentive, and so that often makes up, the basis for a lot of these structures that is fueling the climate issue.
Brilliant work.
Great.